Yes, thank you very much for joining us for the very last session here in La Termica. Actually, there's another session which is called Party, but the last session where we sit on chairs. Thank you very much for joining. This has been a very intense 3 days, also a very intense afternoon again. If you allow me one personal remark, I mean, we had this session on audience science in the around noon. No, I mean, I'm really overwhelmed and utterly grateful for this level of contributions and participation and common discussions and links and references that we were able to make in these last 3 days. Nevertheless, I mean, we thought instead of wrapping up and telling what has happened and so on, I mean, we have to maybe use other channels like in digital formats for this. We have plenty of opportunities to stay in touch, to continue to work. Then there were also really a lot of ideas already how to continue, how to further develop and prototype this format. But rather than wrapping up, we thought that this last session would be actually a really interesting opportunity to, so now, I mean, I can explain this only in soccer terminology, football. It's kind of, and I cannot, I mean, I have difficulties translating this to English. So, I mean, in German it's called Steilpass. No? I looked it up. It's a through ball or a long ball. No? Particularly in the context of sports like soccer, it refers to a pass that sends the ball forward, often into space, for a teammate to run onto. No, it's about creating new spaces that don't exist in the match yet. No, I think what we got from Teresa Ribera today at noon, is such a Steilpass. I don't think through ball or long ball doesn't work. No, but let's stay with the German Steilpass. Kindergarten, Rucksack. We just add Steilpass. Yeah? So this is an incredible opportunity for us, and we have to pick it up and we have to turn this into something that really matters. She has mentioned, I think, 2 or 3 times the term artistic intelligence in her speech. This really means a lot for us, and it is perfect that we can conclude, or at least preliminarily conclude this event, with another attempt to briefly look at this concept from different perspectives. There will be many, many possibilities to follow up in depth and detail. We run a cost action on this topic, with the title Artistic Intelligence. Please, we will distribute the links how you can sign up for this, and there will be regular meetings on very specific challenges that we have identified beforehand. This cost action will run for 3-4 years. We have also, in the context of Pacesetters, numerous opportunities to follow up and to further discuss this concept of artistic or collective in the context of Pacesetters, we call it collective intelligence. I think when we started to use this term, I mean, or try to fill this term with a new meaning, there are several motivations that are overlapping or that are transposed and lay on top of each other. No? One most obvious, immediate ambition in this context is to get out of this binary of artificial versus natural. I mean, which for us as artists makes no sense. And we think that artistic intelligence is actually a really interesting approach to mediate between human and non-human or more than human agencies. But it is also due, this is, another layer, it's also due to a shift that one may notice. No, it's not obvious. It's probably way too early to talk about a paradigm shift, but I think there are many, many indicators that what we're experiencing is a shift from exclusively cognitive forms of knowledge production that are encoded as science or scientific forms of knowledge production towards more and more affective modes of knowledge production, yeah? Not effective, but affective, in the sense that they're creating affect. Yeah? This is something that really is not uncomplicated. No, it's not just that we say, "Oh, hey, great! Finally, we leave the territory of cognitive, this fixation on cognitive processes, and we shift to affect." I mean, in a certain way, what we experience in the United States at the moment is also a shift to affective forms of policy making. Yeah? I mean, it's creating affect. Yeah? It's not processed through rational, enlightenment-driven parameters anymore. And it also makes no sense to criticize it with the very same arguments. Yeah? This is the situation. And last but not least, and then I hand over to my dear co-panelists, no? And last but not least, I mean, this is not a term that we have invented. I think we have invented and created a number of new terms. Yeah? This is a term that has existed, and it was really, really important insofar as it really represents long lines of artistic and creative production by avant-garde movements across the 20th century. I was very fascinated this summer when I was rereading lots of texts of the Surrealist movement against the backdrop of AI. I mean, it really becomes something different, and it has completely different impact. And this is not only about automatic writing, I mean, which some of them were really obsessed with. Yeah, it's kind of how do we gain access, or how can we work with a collective unconsciousness, and how can we do this in a different way that also sets us apart from the way how, for example, fascists are using media. This was a big topic in the 1920s and 1930s, and apparently it's a big topic today again. So I think the kind of encouragement that we got today from Teresa Ribera to go ahead with this concept of artistic intelligence, because this constitutes the competitive edge of Europe. Yeah? We have to figure out what do we do with this invitation offer, with this support, with this potential. I think it's pure potential, and we have to figure out what are the constellations that we need now, what are the future consortia, what are the strategies, yeah, in order to realize this potential. But these last 3 days make me very, very optimistic and confident that we will come up at least with a number of very different and very serious and ambitious proposals and suggestions how to do this. Maybe I start with Jackie. You have been spending the last, not the last 3 days with trying to document. I mean, your mission as a documentary filmmaker with really a long and outstanding practice over the last 3 decades, and also collaborative filmmaking, what is the role of documentary practices when we talk about artistic intelligence? I mean, we talked this at noon, we talked in audience science panel, we talked a lot about data, no? But I think documentary practices are not so much concerned with data. They are producing much more elaborate documents, no? That now today can be put in relationship and in reference in a completely different way. And this would be also, I mean, one of the first ways to define or to delineate artistic intelligence as the power to create references. No?
Also, wait.
Maybe you introduce yourself and your background a little bit
Sure.
more in detail.
I'm Jackie. Oh, there you go. I've met a lot of you. I want to interview more of you. And yeah, I've spent most of my life making films sort of by accident, inside of movements and inside of collectives, and creating infrastructures. I'm thinking of all of the things we spoke about today, and it's so exciting to be in this space with all of you and be talking about this. And you know, we're talking about artistic intelligence, and really, I think that's what we've been doing. That's what we've been practicing these last few days. And much in the spirit of that, this panel is improvised and messy, and all the things and unexpected. And I think unexpected things will come out of this discussion as they've come out of other things, and will generate new things. And that's what I think the best documentary practices also do. And they also create this lineage and these citations that we can use that are entangled within each other, not just through time, but through space. And I'm hoping that all of many of the contributions you all have made in the past few days will be able to not just archive, but live on and become other things and generate other things. And I think I was really inspired by the infrastructure talk just now with the Dyn.org folks. And one of the many things, if we're going back in time, that I was a part of was creating media networks, alternative media networks and infrastructures. And they were led by artists, and they were part of movements, inside of movements. And they were all the things that we're talking about that we want, right? They're distributed, they're anti-authoritarian by nature, they're unexpected and experimental by nature. And I think that's wonderful, and I think it's exciting, and I also think it provides a lot of models. And one thing I do want to just put out there, and I was thinking about this panel a little bit before I came up, and I was thinking, because there's so little time, everybody's ready to go to the next workshop, which is dancing, and I hope everybody's ready for that. But I was thinking about what do I want to leave you with from my experience and some of my preoccupations, which I'm still going to carry outside of this. And I was thinking about what Valerie said the other day about conflict, which is just to say, we have this term we're going to use, artistic intelligence, and it's sort of cheeky, right, in relation to our AI and artificial intelligence, sure. But intelligence, even human intelligence, is contested. Nobody knows what it is. People define it in different ways. The tech oligarchs define intelligence in terms of what OpenAI will do for you. It's many things. They operationalize it, right? What will it be? We don't know what human intelligence is. It's many, many things. And artistic intelligence is a term, if we're going to use it and claim it and live within it, it's going to be contested. It's not something that is just, here it is, we've unveiled it, we all know what it is in our skin. It's something we're gonna have to fight for. It's something that will, I think, much like some of the, and infrastructures, you pointed out, Adam, are not forever. They fade away. But I also hope that they are resilient. And I also think that I want to learn how to make more resilient, stronger infrastructures than maybe I made when I was 20. I want to take that experience and these opportunities that I didn't have with that to think through how we can really take this opportunity. We can really make that, like, I can't pronounce the German word. I can do the long throw. Steilpass. We can really take that Steilpass. And I think that means not just embracing and thinking what, of all the things that we know artistic intelligence is, and I think Dan also laid out lots of things. It's mobile, it's agile, it's situated, it's local, it's built on trust. And then documentary practices are built on trust. You cannot make a documentary without trust. That doesn't happen. And these kind of artworks don't happen without trust. So all of this it's all the same thing, right? It's bubbling up from the surface. We've been doing all these things. But I just want to, the only thing I'm going to leave you with is that I think that in all of that, we can't take it for granted, and we're going to have to, it's a contested space, what that artistic intelligence becomes, not something that Google then puts on, whatever. We know how these things happen already. And so let's take that space and let's use that unexpectedness, right? And the last thing I'm going to say is just, I'm sure you guys have all read or many of you have probably read the article by Pasquinelli and Holler about the new scope, which I sort of love, and all of my preoccupations around how we find this new frame now. And at the end, they basically start talking about artistic intelligence, although they don't say it that way. They say, well, what escapes? What exceeds the capture? What exceeds the frame? And it's the unexpected. And I think we have within us the ability to create those unexpected things. I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, Martin, maybe you want to pick it up as well.
Yeah,
you have you are a capacity when it comes to AI and music, not only from your background as a music producer and musician, but also you produced one of the main reference works, no? A book on the impact of music, of AI on music, and this project started even before the Attention is All You Need article was published, and the big hype of AI, as we experienced it over the last years, began. So what would be artistic intelligence from your perspective?
So I'm glad it's not an academic conversation about artistic intelligence, because I'd never heard the term before, and I like that because I'm fed up of speaking about AI and hearing AI, and so the part that I think is useful that struck me today, or one of the earlier meetings, was when the idea of the future of work, and this as a massive issue. And there's a few buzzwords that were kind of bouncing around, like, for instance, when you were chatting earlier about unions, and I was kind of going, we can't use that word, if we're speaking about collectiveness. And then I went, actually, it's written on the tin, we've got the European Union, and I realized I've so rarely use that term. And so a couple of contradictions and a few things standing in plain sight. One is that when it comes to music or artistic work, things that we take for granted, right? In whatever practice that we're in, and I've worked 45 years and still am working as a musician or a music manager. And very rarely, and only as the bank of last resort, do we ever use cash to make things happen. It's about trying to keep the lights on, trying to make things work. We take that idea as being fundamental to everybody. Whatever your practice is, your innate, tacit knowledge, motivations to do things. This is now something that where the term gig economy is a standard, and where the experiences that we have had as artists or people in that area are shared with taxi drivers. My dad was a taxi driver, so I don't see a massive distinction between what he did and what I do. But I think that we may have wisdom that can come from the things that we take for granted that are standing in plain sight. So things like sustainability, economic sustainability, ideas of how, for instance, how hard it is. So I've recently gone into the startup world, and we all hear about how competitive it is. It's nothing compared to being a band. Nothing. Right? Easy. Academia, nothing compared to working in the arts. So that toughness, I kind of like that kind of idea that now when the going, the old Hunter S. Thompson saying, which when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro. And I think that if there's artistic intelligence, it's kind of like the fact that when the shit hits the fan, and if that's what's happening, that we can actually turn to going, well, we've always survived on the margins. It's just now that everybody else is kind of being pushed to that. I don't want to make it sound too polemic, but it does seem fairly simple. So that's kind of where the way I was thinking about it, and also the collaborative nature, like, and ideas of trust. So I'll finish on this one. I was given a talk in Liverpool, and back in June, and I was on a panel, and I knew I felt I was being set up because I was being asked to speak about trust, and I really did think that this was like to get up in front of serious people and say, look, trust is something that is real and tangible. And I was lucky enough to be, I went to Lagos 2 weeks beforehand, and I was seeing a round table of a different economic community, a much younger community, very, very proud of the fact that they were dominating music and trying to figure out how to make money from this. And seeing AI as being an agent to enable a way to create economic benefits. And I spoke about trust. And I asked them, I said, how does trust work? And I told them I felt I was being set up with this thing in Liverpool. And it was like, I was asking the dumbest question in the room. It was like, how do you think anything works without trust? And so I kind of went, well, if that's how that's working, then that's how I've operated and managed to put things together. So I know I'm repeating myself here, but sometimes I think it's a fundamental that we can relate to.
This makes totally sense to me, no? Because I think there is a specific form of trust that you develop in an artistic or arts-based context. It's not necessarily trust between the other visitors of the museum, but it's a form of trust to the artwork that you are appreciating or not. No, I mean, I think it's a very peculiar relationship to the object. But Michael, we have spent a lot of time over summer, very intensely working on this concept of artistic intelligence and other related concepts like audience science, which we discussed, but also the concept of aesthetic resilience, as we framed it. Yeah. How would you relate to this challenge of artistic intelligence?
Well, this is complex. So my background is photographer, philosopher, editor-in-chief of JAR. So I've seen loads of research.
JAR is the
Journal for Artistic Research, sorry. I've seen loads of projects and all that. And I wouldn't really want to speak about what is and isn't intelligence in any of this. But what I've been concerned about is, in a way, the structure within which we operate. And I was wondering, and maybe that this answers your question to some degree, but maybe not fully, how to best explain where I'm standing currently in this topic. And it relates to this recent, AI debate and finding our feet in it and whatever. And the best way I would say the whole field, could be situated is that if you think of the universal computer initially, right, as a kind of meaning processing machine, it's like a linear band of zeros and ones enters this machine. It creates algorithmic machines operating on some data. It's all kind of linear happening through that structure. At some point, somebody said, hey, we need maybe a printer or maybe, like a screen to do something. So user interfaces became relevant, right? But that CPU that does the linear processing, did really not work well. So they came up with these graphic cards, right? So they needed a different chip for different types of data. So there's the GPU in your system, which mainly, of course, served games and other things. So NVIDIA, was a big producer of this, and it is the logic, in a way, of the visual component that's in the computer that runs these systems now. And what I found fascinating recently, and this is kind of where I would, situate intelligence somewhere, is that we could argue it's been discovered that you can process, information in two very different ways: linearly, in this kind of succession of steps and operations, or you can distribute it in ways that you cannot really identify specifically where that data is and what it means. It's diffuse, it's kind of hangs all together in certain very complex relationships. And it looks to me as if we could say that somehow artists are operating in a space that will not be flattened into a single statement that's linearly processable in some way or another. So when we, with the journal, but also myself when I'm working artistically, think about what kind of artifacts are we reviewing, receiving, or what kind of work am I doing, right? I also ask myself, what kind of space am I modulating? What's the topology of that space with which I'm operating? And how open or closed is that space in terms of, in a way, the connections, that encoding can create. Because in some sense, this paradigm that knowledge or information is distributed doesn't stop on the chip. It actually continues in you guys. There is no limit of distribution of this paradigm, right? So even the site at which artistic intelligence operates, is kind of undefinable. But that's what we do, I would say. That happens in the field, and with the technology, but also in a way the context of artistic research having matured in some ways, I think it's much easier now to say, there is a separate paradigm within which we operate, within which we situate a certain mode of intelligence. We don't have to keep defaulting to a CPU, to linear text as a way of doing this. So my question then is, how do we differentiate? How do we practice in that space? And how do we relate to that space? And this is where I would say we've got a problem, and I won't be talking too much about this, but I think that a lot of artists, creative and fully acceptable, within the arts field, are not necessarily, as far as I'm concerned, operating on the full potential of that space. There's a certain fixture we're dealing with all the time. For example, the artist persona, right? Everything is distributed, but the subject, the author, is in control and has a will, in some ways, to fix meaning, right? We keep thinking there is this one person that speaks, right? And in our field, we're getting loads of submissions where is a first-person singular that speaks as if it's an authority in a distributed setting, right? As an example. So there's loads of conventions that come with the history of art that I would say are in the way to engage fully with, artistic intelligence. But when you do, and that's maybe my last point, what seems to happen is, again, not dissimilar to adaptive complex systems, certain emergent structures appear. People are effectively, but also intellectually, able to pick that up. In particular, those who've studied and learned and appreciated this kind of thinking all the time. And it is not subjective only, where we say, I like this, I've got this and this taste, but actually it has a proper status as a message, noisy, but a message, that we can handle and deal with. So my point would be that if we're moving fully into this paradigm, and if we are then evaluating, kind of, so to speak, what intelligent contribution this particular message is, right? Not limited to whatever baggage we carry into this space. I think it's quite exciting. And the final point would be, I think it would solve some of the problems that are being discussed in terms of, for example, efficiencies, where it looks to me as if we work like this because we couldn't do it any other way, right? Forcing me to write a proper description of all the steps I do to make this work, right, in a linear way, would not be an efficient way of doing it, right? And it would not be also communal space, that's been entered into, and so on. So I'm looking at this as paradigmatic, and I would say that artistic research may have emerged not because of some change in higher education or whatever, but actually that culturally we recognize that material articulation, is more relevant than modern text-based approaches to knowledge have been. So that's kind of my take on why I personally feel there's a real shift happening, and that we should be a bit more critical as to what we mean by artistic intelligence in that space, because not everything is fully engaging, right? That's kind of the point.
Yeah, definitely, and I think this is a process that needs to happen. I mean, we see now. I mean, the Commission has picked up this term. No, I mean, in the next work program is a call on artistic intelligence, but they open it up in a way that also includes soft power and crafts, and also so it becomes more like a counter concept to artistic intelligence. I think this is important and legitimate. I mean, we should not even try to define it and limit it to something. We can see the potential clearly as a line of flight out of this kind of synthetic worlds that AI has or will build for us, in which we might not be able to leave anymore. Yeah? But then at the same time, I also think it is interesting, I mean, to leave for a moment the artistic part of artistic intelligence aside, no? And focus on the intelligence part and really pose the question, what is intelligence, or what does intelligence mean in the context in which we are operating? Because, I mean, I see the analogy, yeah, to competitiveness, and soon there will be some kind of Peter Thiel who will tell us intelligence is only for losers. Yeah. So how do we deal with this?
Just a quick one. So I have to stay grounded in my experience on this. That idea as well about competitiveness. There's a great paradox, but it's one that exists. So if you think about it in the arts, it's incredibly competitive. Everybody, well, we're all great and collaborative. 200 actors trying to get the same part. Same thing with bands. So that contradiction and that sense of rivalry so where's the paradox? The paradox is in the motivation. That there are financial rewards. Yeah, that's great if it's the superstar kind of thing, the 1 in a million that takes off. But it's not like a lottery dream that goes through that. So I think that idea of digging into the tacit knowledge that's there and finding ways to articulate what is already known and understood, and in ways that it's communicatable, actionable, create a language that just allows you to realize that you don't feel so isolated and that this is something that's shared. Those very, very common sense things. I think that's something that we don't hear enough about when people think about the humanities and the arts as being soft. Again, you know.
I think I'm going to pick up what you said about, what you said about art, well, and something that we know, right? So artistic intelligence is not the artist's intelligence. It's not contained in the genius of the artist. Artistic intelligence is, in my mind, collective intelligence that goes back and that has a history of creating counter infrastructures. It's its nature. And so I think it's important, and it always exceeds this flattening. It exceeds the way you capture things. And to go back to what Florian was referencing earlier in the day, there are things outside the frame that are always there and present. I think this. Anyway, I think it's important, the collectiveness of this artistic intelligence, and the collectiveness both in now, and that's what artists do best, is important, but also that it's not the artist's intelligence, and it's not something that we own. Artistic intelligence is something that everybody can experiment with, can be with. And Florian, when you said, okay, well, what happens if it becomes a meme when nobody wants to be intelligent or something? I truly, deeply believe that this process, this collective process of experimentation and playfulness and whatever is irresistible. I believe it is irresistible.
Yes. I mean, my point would be that I find that a lot what we call art, I mean artists, but also art institution, art education, art markets, whatever we look at, seem to keep not engaging with this. I mean, there was maybe a critical phase in art schools in the last century, where something was tried out, to have a critical edge, towards whatever happened to late modern work, right? And at the moment, it looks to me as if we don't really kind of foster this capacity institutionally to actually deploy this kind of intelligence. So most people that go through art education, for example, they are not really either taught to or engaging to the degree that I feel could be done. And there's a tension between, in a way, the kind of commodities or the even what they themselves see as being part of a history of art, that holds us back. There's something. So I'm not going to speak against artistic as a concept here. It's really relevant the way you put it, right? But in all the artistic institutions, wherever you go, it seems to be not deployed in a way that it should be, right? And this for me is a big issue that we might be continuing to be pigeonholed ourselves in a particular place that we have been put into from romantic times, and still be in this position and feeling kind of comfortable with that, when in fact actually this is nothing specific that we should be the professionals for, but we keep holding us back. And there's one strand, I've forgotten how it's called, but of the three with unlearning or creativity, whatever, where basically there's so many presuppositions about who I'm supposed to be, to be, relevant in this particular way. And for me, that is problematic. So it's too quick to claim intelligence when I see how difficult it is for myself and whatever community, to actually engage with it properly. I see it as a massive failure on a large scale in those communities to have failed with the critical discourse and in a way not really engaging sufficiently with the material discourse they are having already, right? Sounds very critical I don't know if you agree or not, but I just want to suggest it's not a given that this intelligence exists, right? And it requires care, it requires, engagements, and it requires all sorts of stuff, and they are not topic normally, right?
No, it probably has to be reenacted and built and reinvented and reproposed and redefined over and over again. No, it's nothing that you can hold or grasp. I'm not speaking from inside the institution, but I also think it's something you look for outside. And I don't want to rope you into this, but I think if, as a working artist outside of an institution, you just do it.
Yeah. Just a couple of things. Excuse me. Yeah, I've only recently come back to school, so it's the protocols and the institutional norms I'm completely unaware of and oblivious to, so I don't understand a lot of what you spoke about there in that regard, and I'm sure in the context of that it makes sense. What makes sense to me is this. I have been looking at this idea of AI for a very long time, and what's very clear to me is that we now see this term being used all the time. And it's also, and you hear it said quite a bit, but it's useful for us to say that there's also no such thing as AI. So if we take that as being the first part, then the idea that there's no such thing as artistic intelligence, well, that seems to me to make a lot of sense as well. But it also gives us a kind of a blank canvas or an opportunity to counteract that. And again, just with very simple, it just seems to be such a logical way to solve a lot of the questions, and to hear that coming from the Vice President today, it just kind of made me go, this doesn't sound too complicated. And also, I've forgotten the guy's name, but he was brilliant, who spoke in the other room with the blue jacket. Yeah, yeah. And he said, we was talking about America, and he said, the thing about, well, if America is doing that, maybe we should say they're not part of the West. And those kind of, to me, they're very artistic perspectives. And whether you agree with them or you don't, they provoke something else inside of you. And the one thing that comes from that I know for certain is that provokes a sense of hope and a sense of not being excluded, even if you are on the margins. And that's a different narrative to everything that's associated in all the conversations that we see about AI, all of the consequences of that. And fundamentally, just to go back to business for a second, because we've been speaking about the pandemic, one of the things that I find fascinating is that, and it's to do, the institution of, say, the art industry, whether that's the music industry, the one I know, has very, very little to do with the people who actually work in music. Just take music. So prior to COVID, there was a study, 93% of people who worked as professional musicians earned less than $24,000 a year, which meant they had to have 2 or 3 jobs. That was a given. Then COVID came, and what was really interesting for me at the time, because I was studying it, was that it was unquestioned in pretty much every country that the arts should be supported. And then we had this idea, well, then AI has come along and threatened all our jobs, but there wasn't any jobs. So that then presents but if you think about it, that economic dilemma is just like the emperor's new clothes, that has a proposition basically means you can't do any worse than it already was. So if there's no such thing as artificial intelligence and there's no such thing as artistic intelligence, yet we fundamentally know that we have a motivation to do things of which money is important, but it's, again, the last thing that we can usually rely on to make the things work, certainly outside of academic funding, which is a new thing to me, just like trying to make stuff happen, then it just seems to... Does that make any sense?
I think it makes a lot of sense. Are there... No, I mean, I think that it's exactly, I mean, the challenge is to find languages, grammars, words, and to also, of course, we don't have to invent them all the time, reuse and fill existing concepts with new meaning that allow us to navigate these paradoxes. Because these are really paradoxical situations, and without having experienced this, without understanding this on a purely theoretical level, you don't get it if you have not lived through it. No? And I think these are challenges. We have a similar challenge. We discussed this very long, and there's, I think, very interesting work that is happening at the moment on the situated knowledges and how to include, is there a chance to engage situated knowledges in a kind of post-Bayesian models or approaches, no? That respect the embeddedness and the embodiment of knowledges in very specific contexts, but at the same time also don't lock it in these contexts. I mean, and make them mobile and fugitive and travel across different sites.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I feel like I'm between you, and I agree with you both in the sense that I don't think I take it for granted, for sure. But I also don't think it exists. I'm going to go back to, I think it's contested, and I think we need to fill it and use it, and it's only useful. It's a useful term. Is it a useful term? Do we think it's a useful term? If it is, and it can contain those desires that we have for doing things differently, then let's try to define it, populate it, leave it open. I think Dan mentioned these paradigmatic, properties that are deep in the arts, like keeping the ability to keep discussions open and a little enigmatic. And I think those do relate to the arts. But I also am going to make a really strong case for the fact that artistic intelligence isn't the property of artists. Though artists can take it, but it's not the property of artists. Yeah.
I think, I mean, in many, Dan, are you still here? In many conversations, no? I mean, I think artistic intelligence can also mean or refer to this shift from product to process. What is relevant and what artists and creatives, and not only artists and creatives, everybody who develops a desire to create affect or be affected through artworks. What matters and what the contribution to society, to the wider context of society, are not the products of artistic work. This is for the collectors and
ways of knowing and thinking. Yeah.
It's the processes. It's the way to work, and the desire to always find new ways of working together. I think this is what is at stake.
And just if I'm from correcting what you're saying from processes, like what I just want to check something about in terms of my understanding, because
we're working it out here.
Yeah, no, I get that. But what I think could be really, really powerful is that if I'm correct in what you're saying, that And again, it's anecdotal, but it's just, so while I was here, I'd be out making phone calls. And I realized I was trying to get some things done, whether it was like getting a PA together for a show or trying to pay off some bills with accountants and other things. And I realized that who I was speaking to, what was I could expect of that person, where they wouldn't feel offended, was very, very, very different depending on where they were situated. Whether they had this notion of artistic intelligence, which I was trading off, which is based on trust, meaning, listen, I really need you to do that for me, and I don't have to say, I will pay you back. You just know that there's going to be a reciprocal arrangement in that. We take that for granted. I go to another conversation, and then it's like, well, you're going to have to pay me by the end of the month. And I'm going, well, that's the university. That's not me. It's not my fault. That's because they're taking Christmas holidays now. And you realize that you can't use the same thing that you were speaking to with one person because they're not part of that network of what is effectively tacit knowledge. And we take that for granted. But if that was articulated, then it could be possible to maybe use that in other domains.
I think this is a super interesting discussion, and also on a technical level. I think I remember with Andrea over summer we discussed this a lot. I mean, when Kobe is making the step to multimodality, no, you have developed this concept of the MOPS. No, I forgot what this the acronym standing. Yeah, memory organization package. No, so and I think the potential is in the moment when we talk about truly multimodal architectures for these models, we will very soon encounter exactly this challenge that for wherever your position is in the creative divisions of labor, you have a completely different understanding and a totally different perspective on the same piece of script or fraction of an image or stage or sequence of images and so on and so forth. No, I mean there's the multimodality comes with a multiplicity of different perspectives based on the different position in the creative processes in which you find yourself and from which you contribute. And this is an incredibly complex challenge. And the question is, what happens if we describe it? What happens if we make this tacit knowledge, no? That the script, that an actor reads a script in the theater in a completely different way than the stage designer, for example, and I think there are much more extreme examples. So what happens if you make this tacit knowledge explicit? Is it then like these stupid wall texts in museums for contemporary art that are treating the audiences like idiots and explaining them how they have to understand the artwork?
No, it's as functional. It's as functional as making the economics of barter apparent. And not seeing that as being something that is a lesser transaction than cash. That's all.
Can I just quickly add? I think it's important to me really that it is not that open. There is historical form, institutional form inscribed in these processes, and I think it's too quick if we, in a way, feel we are, in a way or another, outside of this contested space that you rightly point out. I mean, for me, really, whatever you make or embed, if you're talking technically, or whatever it is you do there, right? It operates within historical forms, and the way we work with those, so through which artistic intelligence would be articulated, right? Is susceptible to questions, to do with the historical form that it takes. and all I'm trying to say is that we have to keep that in mind in whatever discussion there is, right? That it's already bound up in these forms, even, and this is kind of the point, even artists who are in a way outside of academia, outside of this or that, right? There is just a historical form that suggests that the artist is outside of this, which in itself is problematic, right? It's just a negative. I mean, it's always been negative historical form for art to play this, and I'm just seeing it as institutional form as well. So there is not this kind of space that makes that persona different in any way. It's just that historically, artists are encoded as being this persona that has this role to play, which of course is relevant for the context in which we trying to solve big problems as a society, right? Because there are resources that come with that. But there's also problems that come with that because, as I was trying to say, and really, I mean, I'm really agreeing with the contestedness of this, that at the end, getting these into perspectives, working them out, and intelligently responding to what the material with which you work offers, would be important. And there is it's not a given, right? This is the important part. And anyway, so we might say the same thing or not. I'm not quite sure where we stand on the panel, but that's the important part for me. That I'd like to develop those forms. I'm interested in what can we come up with, better forms that are not falling back onto the existent forms within which we are supposed to find intelligence in artistic practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I think this would have been a wonderful closing statement unless there are urgent desires. I think we did our duty, and we can move to the next session, which is called Party. And we really need the pictures of people dancing at a research project gathering. Yes. So. I think it is. I think that just what I will not bother you now with endless thank you. But we will do this. We will find a way how to adequately and appropriately thank everybody who contributed to this event. And I think it was a truly collective organization. No, I mean it was, for me, totally amazing to see how in a really decentralized fashion decisions have been made in a completely distributed way, and this is why they were working. And there was a level of commitment and taking care that was really, really overwhelming. But I think we should give all these people who were working in the backgrounds and made sure that everything could run so terribly smoothly as it did. Yeah. The video team from Krakow, the Mohammed and everybody who worked in the theater and on other formats. The people who took care of the really complicated registration procedure and made sure that everything is signed and recorded and so on. I mean, of course, last but not least, Nerea, Mari, Jackie, I mean, who really did an absolutely awesome job, not only the last couple of days, but over months in putting this event together, and this was quite a hack. So, I mean, I'm really, really overwhelmed and impressed, and I think this is enough reason to celebrate and to have a bit of a party. So thank you very much. So there's one thing, I mean, not only that I forgot to mention Marshall, but I mean, Marshall plays a really crucial role together with Nerea. Everybody knows how the thing with the buses to Genalgasil is happening tomorrow. You get all the information by email, so don't forget to check your email. This is probably the best, because and it's yeah, and we can reiterate this information then also through the Signal channel and all the other opportunities. So let's have a drink.